Aloha, I'm Malia Zimmerman, and this is News Behind the News. Today we're going to talk about the move for global gun control and global rights for Second Amendment. And I have Julianne Versnell, who is the Second Amendment Foundation Operations Director, and she's also involved in the movement nationwide and also worldwide.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure, I'm so excited to have you on because we've been trying on different trips to get you here while you're here from Seattle, and this is going to be the first show that we've had you here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. There's not too many women in the movement for Second Amendment that are as high profile as you are, and so that's why I was really happy that you were here today. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can go into some of the groups you're involved with. But first, a little bit background on you.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest where firearms are every day, and I grew up in a time frame when most people had some sort of firearm in their home. My father kept his handgun underneath the mattress on his side of the bed, and when we changed the sheets, we moved the gun and we put it back. Never occurred to us to touch it, to take it, or to do anything with it. We just knew it wasn't. We knew it wasn't a toy and it wasn't a game. And later on, my father would take me to shoot skeet and trap, and to go duck hunting, which was not my favorite thing, but I learned to reload the shotgun shells that I had used, and so I've really been doing this and been involved with the actual art of shooting since I was very young. I've always been interested in it, but it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized that it really was a civil right, and it wasn't being called one.
So what about some of the groups you are involved with, and how did you get involved with them?
Well, I'm Director of Operations for the Second Amendment Foundation. I came to the foundation shortly after it started. I came in 1976 and started with their publications and helping the organization set up their offices and procedures, because that's when they were a brand new baby organization.
And that's in Bellevue, Washington,
In Bellevue,
right?
Washington, yes. And then I've continued on over the years in sort of a more of a management role. But one of the things that I was able to have the opportunity to do was to work on the Journal on Firearms and Public Policy. And this year was its 25th anniversary. And in that capacity, I have been excuse me, able to meet people from literally all around the world. Scholars, historians, economists, sociologists, as well as a lot of lawyers. And that just opened up so many things to me and so many opportunities to meet more people. And I just became more and more personally involved in the actual philosophy and history and sociology, et cetera, of the issue.
Because part of the organization has a printing press, and you published a lot of books, right?
Yes.
And on Second Amendment issues, and so that and basically every year you have a conference that you help put together, that you organize in different parts of the country.
Yes.
And give out some of those books and sell those books and so on. But maybe you can talk about some of those conferences and what goes on there, and how people can get involved to know more about it.
Every year, well, this last one that was just in Houston was our 28th annual Gun Rights Policy Conference. They're older than two of my children. And we move them from city to city. Next year, we will be in Chicago, Illinois. I know everyone asks, why are we in Chicago? We're going back to Chicago again, a second time, because of our Moore victory that we had there. We had gone before because of the McDonald victory, which was the case that went to the Supreme Court that said that every state had to allow their people to have the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. And the Moore case was the case where the federal court ruled that people in Illinois had a right to concealed carry just like the other 49 states in the country did. So Chicago was Illinois was the last state. So that's why we're going back there.
And it was a successful conference there a few years back.
Yes, it was very successful.
Very well attended.
And very well attended, yes.
Good.
And at the conference, people have a chance to meet about 500 people from around the country. They get to listen to the best and the brightest minds in terms of research, in terms of legal strategy, in terms of scholarship. They also get a chance to hear what's going on in other states, how things are successful, what people are doing, what they've found to be that works the best. And then they get tips on other things. You speak all the time, and you speak on media, how to do things with the media, how to get a pro-gun message across in the media.
Right, and a lot of it is talking about alternative media, and
Yes.
things like this
Yes.
television show,
Yes.
for example. Well, okay, so what about, you not only work on the issues in America, but now you've taken this into an international forum, which is really an international battleground and an interesting battleground. There's a lot going on. Maybe you can fill us in on some of the big movements right now going on globally, because a lot of times we hear about bans, the attempt to ban worldwide firearms and things like that. Maybe you can talk about that.
For the past 8 years, I've been working on what has eventually become the Arms Trade Treaty, the ATT, which has been a topic of endless discussion. It's amazing how many meetings it has involved, but that is the claim is that it is not gun control, but it is rather import and export. But everybody should recognize that this treaty covers everything, literally from battleships to bullets and everything in between. So you're talking about battleships, you're talking about destroyers, you're talking about tanks, and then you're talking about what's called a small arm, okay, which is your handgun, your shotgun, your rifle, and bullets. The other thing that a lot of this stuff covers is what's called light weapons. So they call it SALW, small arms and light weapons. A light weapon is anything that only takes two people, like a mortar, like an anti-aircraft, or a bazooka, but they claim that it's about all the other things. But when it comes down to it, the meat, the topics, and the discussion are always about the small arms and now about the bullets.
So there's a tension between the people who want to, say, have a ban or have a lot more control over firearms versus the people who believe in self-protection and that kind of thing? Is that the meat of it?
That is, in a lot of what goes on actually when you're dealing with the countries. When you go to the United Nations, there are 193 countries, and the delegates generally are, I would say, 180 of them are very, very anti-gun, and they really don't think that the people are their citizens, their residents of their countries are smart enough to have firearms, or maybe they're worried about their own security. Some of the most vocal critics of civilian firearms ownership, which is what we're talking about, are the countries that are most repressive.
Like the dictatorships and things like that.
The dictatorships, yes. Because one of the big topics of discussion was to make sure that firearms were not exported to non-state actors. A non-state actor being somebody who's not the official government. How the U.S. and other countries were going to resolve this in terms of when they armed the rebels to overturn Muammar Gaddafi or something, I don't know, but a lot of countries are there because they're just trying to protect their self-interest more than anything. The United Nations does not recognize an individual right to self-defense. They recognize the right of a state to self-defense. So sometimes it gets pretty lonely there. The United States has been pretty much on its own until the Canadian government made a major policy shift when the ruling party changed in Canada. So we were pretty much on our own.
Well, the interesting thing too is that you go into this international battlefield, and are there mostly men there, or are there some women?
They're all men.
They're all men.
They are all men.
Yeah.
And for some reason, this is just not. It's just not. And this has been true for pretty much my entire life. This is not the right position for a woman, a mother, a female to take, because I say that this is a right of choice, a right to defend oneself, to defend one's children, and all anybody else can see is that no one is bright enough, and even themselves, they're terrified of firearms. So I think no, there are no women. There are a lot of men, and it's important that we get more women involved in this.
So in terms of just on this topic of women being involved in the Second Amendment movement here and worldwide, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Why is that so important? I mean, when you think about it, it levels the playing field between a man and a woman if a man's attacking a woman.
Well, yes,
right?
Well, it does. It levels the playing field between the young and the old, and between the people who are not in as good of physical health. It's really important. But for some reason, the idea is it's better to be a victim than to fight back. If you just, and this has been, they always spout these statistics that you're more likely to be injured with your own firearm, not even taking into account that basically all you have to do is show the firearm, and the aggressor is just as afraid of it as somebody else, and they're going to take off because they don't want to get hurt.
That's right, yeah. Well, in terms of Hawaii, just so people watching know about Hawaii, we have may issue,
Yes.
which instead of shall issue, which mean for concealed carry. And so the police chiefs in four different counties, our 4 different counties, can decide if they're going to issue a concealed carry permit to whoever is applying. And we basically haven't had anybody approved here since I think 45 years ago or something like that. And unless there's very rare occasions when obviously the police have it, some of the attorney generals, but mostly it's just the law enforcement.
Yes.
And once in a while, in the past, there would be somebody working for the mayor who got a threat, who needed to carry one or something like that. But the general population is not allowed to do that here.
No, and it varies from state to state. I live in Washington State, where it is a shall issue, not a may issue. Hawaii happens to be one of the worst may issue states
That's true.
that there are. And these are issues that we're constantly litigating, we're constantly trying to improve. I never thought in my lifetime that we would ever get a case to the Supreme Court, so that the Heller decision, which was D.C. v. Heller, where Dick Heller ended up the lone plaintiff at that time, filed suit to allow himself to have a firearm in his home. You couldn't even have one in your home to protect yourself. You had no right of self-defense. The claim was the Second Amendment was a collective right. It had to do with a militia. Well, this case said no. It's a 2008 no. There is an individual right. And then the McDonald case in 2010 said not only is there this right, but no state can deny this right. So, and we're looking to expand that. That was one of the things with MORE in Illinois. There were no carry permits. They were not issued. There was no process or anything else. So while you have may issue, they had no issue at all.
Mm-hmm. We have about 1.4 million people in Hawaii, and more than 1 million firearms registered here, not to mention the ones that aren't registered because they were acquired before, I think it's 1992. They don't have to be registered. So you have this, it's very popular here to own a firearm, but there's just such restrictive laws.
There are, and I don't know why in Hawaii, since it basically is sort of in its own way, it's it was a new frontier. So I don't really know why things ended up the way that they did here. I know that it's extremely unfortunate, but it doesn't look like your legislature is ever going to do anything to change that at all.
Not for a really long time, probably, unless the people really change and the attitudes change. But,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think
we do have some good legislators in terms of being positive on the Second Amendment issue and working to keep at least the laws from getting more strict, because there's always that attempt every year to add to the laws. And so that's good that some of the key Democrats that are in power don't want to see additional laws because they know how strict it is here already.
Right, and you're lucky that they're able to hold the line. Unfortunately, internationally, that hasn't been the case, and things are becoming more and more restrictive. And Europe is actually the EU has actually led with a lot of the legislation, a lot of what they call the model legislation, which is what they hand out to other countries, and they are become so much more restrictive, so very much more restrictive, and that's following all over the rest of the world.
So for the international front, what do people in America have to be concerned about that? Why do people here have to say, well, why do I care about what the UN does? How does it impact us?
It impacts us in that while the treaty may not pass, what happens is a lot of the things that are in the treaty become policy, so that our State Department that approves imports and exports follows those guidelines, or follows the guidelines that there aren't our law. We haven't adopted the treaty, but they just say that's going to be our policy. For example, right now the State Department won't let the military surplus M1 Garands come into the country. And they've been coming into the country for the last 50 years. But all of a sudden this administration has decided, totally by regulation, that it's not going to happen anymore. So Americans need to understand that their rights can be curtailed just because of bureaucracy or the Department of State or BATFE decides, that's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, decides that they're going to make things more restrictive just by fiat, not by law.
Mm-hmm. So when you go to these conferences, where have the conferences been? Sounds like you've gotten to travel to some exotic places, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what the conferences have been about.
I'm lucky enough to represent the Second Amendment Foundation on the executive committee of an organization called the World Forum on Shooting Sports, and that has allowed me to meet people from all over the world and to travel around the world. To have our discussions. We talk about policy, we talk about organizing for things like the arms trade treaties, for the BMS, the biennial meeting of states, et cetera. And I've met a fascinating group of people and a wonderful group of people to work with, and that's been interesting. Outside of that, I've had the opportunity to travel other places. Most recently, surprisingly to me, we're in Moscow, Russia, where they held a meeting, the Russian Federation for firearms, the right to keep and bear arms. And when they talk about the right to keep and bear arms, that's what they mean. They want the right to carry a firearm for self-protection, because Moscow, Russia, is a very, very dangerous place. And I had the opportunity to go there and to speak, and it was fascinating to see 200 activists from across Russia who met together, and the government knows this is going on. There's nothing hidden about this at all. And to listen to these people who really, they want the right to keep and bear arms.
And it's a little scary to speak up in Russia these days, so that's pretty bold of them.
One of the people who spoke was the vice chairman of the Russian Federation, which is the equivalent to our Senate. So it was probably number 3, number 4 person in the government. So that was very interesting, and I had an opportunity to meet with him privately and have a very substantive discussion on where they're going and what they are looking for there. They recognize, as you know, in Hawaii, that the police can't be everywhere and they can't protect everyone, and they're just bad people on the streets that they don't respect you or your life. They don't respect their own either. So they don't care. So it was really fascinating, and it was fascinating to see how they'd incorporated some of this into their culture. They had a concealed carry fashion show, which was very interesting, very, very interesting.
Oh, and then you also got to go, I think it was to Italy, or where was
my first meeting that I ever went to out of the country for this was in Palermo, Sicily, which was not an easy place to get to either. For the Europeans it may be, but not for the people that are coming from North America. And I was obviously the first woman. I am still the only woman, and when I went there, they thought that I was going to help them change their PowerPoint presentations, and they handed me the laptop to do so, at which point I just told them that was not what I was there for. And over the years, I have developed some really strong friendships with a lot of people in that organization.
So it's paid off to be.
It is.
Yeah.
It is more than paid off. It has paid off in what we do in Europe. It has paid off in what we do at the United Nations, and it has really paid off in what we do in the United States, because those friendships are really, really important. I've had the chance and the opportunity to meet with U.S. diplomats who have been a wealth of information and expertise and knowledge and suggestions, who are very, very pro-individual gun rights. I've worked with people who are with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms on these issues. They are as hard core believers in the Second Amendment and the civil right to keep and bear arms as I am. And I've also had the opportunity to meet a really nice group of retired generals who are some of the most intelligent, insightful people that I've had a chance to work with, and I have had incredible opportunities to work with the preeminent scholars on the issue, the lawyers, and have over the years, I'm very lucky to call them friends.
And how does that group that you're involved with, the sporting shooting group, tie in with the United Nations group?
The World Forum on Shooting Activities sends a representative to the United Nations. And when I say sends a representative, there's usually a contingent of several people. Additionally, I attend the United Nations as a representative for a non-governmental organization, and there are a core of about 12 of us who are the pro-civilian arms rights, pro-civilian arms possession group. And the World Forum coordinates that to a certain extent. It's a very lonely position to take in those meetings. You're lucky if you get a seat in the back of the room, literally, where the other non-governmental organizations will get 15 minutes to speak. The pro-gun rights groups, pro-civil rights groups will get 3 minutes to speak. So it's important that we all work together, and this allows us a structure and an umbrella group so that we all can work together on these things.
So when you do speak at the United Nations, what is it that what's the main message to them?
I always have my own message, and my own message is the message of self-defense, the right of a woman to self-defense, because the United Nations is constantly talking about gender inequity, gender rights, gender victimization, and my message to them every single time is, well, if you want to stop this, then you give women the right to defend themselves and their families. Because particularly in Africa, where a lot of the stuff stems from the atrocities that occur in Africa, those women are absolutely defenseless, absolutely defenseless. Their husbands control them, or their partners control them. They have no rights. They can't even go to a hospital without permission. And in many cases, they are out in the middle of nowhere by themselves. They're there just to be victims.
So if people want to get more information about your organization, Second Amendment Foundation, or the other movements that you're involved with, where can they look? And do you have a website?
Yes, they can go to www.samalphafrank.org, which is Second Amendment Foundation. We also have another organization, which is IAPCAR, which is the International Association for the Protection of Civilian Arms Rights, IAPCAR.org. And they can go there as well to get information on the international things. And as always, my email is JHB, John Henry Victor, @saf.org, and they're welcome to try to reach me there and ask me any questions they'd like.
All right. Well, hopefully we can get people to your Second Amendment conference in Chicago. It's always an exciting 2-day event, and I look forward to seeing you there.
And I look forward to seeing you again, too.
Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
All right. This has been News Behind the News. Aloha.